Gus Malzahn on the hot seat, naming Shaun White his starting quarterback. I have a lot of questions and a lot of angles to take on this one, but Dave, we'll start with you in regards to your reaction to the Shaun White announcement.
I will admit, the more I kept hearing, the more I kept thinking about it. I'm not totally surprised. Jeremy Johnson, I think Gus Malzahn, and I think we knew what we saw to him last year. I think we know what he has in him. Shaun White, for most part last year, when he was healthy and when he first started playing, when he was healthy, he actually looked okay. The Auburn offense looked better under him when he was healthy at any point last season than it did under Jeremy Johnson. But of course, a lot of people were pointing at John Franklin III coming in for a junior college transfer. And you know what? It's kind of weird that we wanted to hand him the job because he was more like Nick Marshall than any other guy on the roster, and maybe Gus Malzahn can recreate some of that magic of some of that type of offense, but he didn't really have a lot of experience coming out of junior college running an offense. Only really started the last game of the season for that team, and that was really it. They were, I guess, impressed with the athleticism, offered him a scholarship to bring him in. But, I think with Gus Malzahn, with Shaun White, we're definitely not going to see the run-heavy offense where we're used to seeing with Nick Marshall. It may be more of the Springdale offense and that we saw with more of the wide-open passing attack. So, the read option, the option with the backs, that's not going to be the option of what we were used to seeing with that Auburn offense. So I'm not totally surprised it was Shaun White from everything I heard in camp, and I think we're pointing to what we saw last year from the Auburn offense.
Well, people tend to get, fans especially, get enamored with the shiny guy, the new guy, the new toy in town, and that's John Franklin III. Obviously, he comes from Florida State, and there was just a thought that he was going to be able to be the dynamic Nick Marshall type running this offense. Shaun White, I've talked to a number of people that don't really watch SEC football gun to gun, and especially with Auburn kind of dropping off the map at 7-6 last year, didn't watch the kid play. He can play. They saw the one touchdown pass, but Shaun White is the best pocket passer in my estimation for the Auburn Tigers. He's the best guy making all the throws on the field. Doesn't necessarily have the strongest arm. Jeremy Johnson is the strongest arm, but Shaun White has the best grasp of the offense, the coolest head, the best guy to deliver the football in the pocket. But Dave, you touch upon something that to me is fascinating because we talked about it a few weeks ago, and I'm looking at Mike specifically because we talked about it in regards to the way Auburn and Gus Malzahn run their offense when it was devastating, when it was the best rushing team in college football. I don't care what the stats said. They were running against the best defenses at like 500 yards a game and getting to the national championship game. Gus Malzahn talked about it at SEC Media Day where he was going to be less CEO and he was going to be more football coach, especially running the offense and getting the specifics down, that the details down that need to be ironed out and buttoned up to run his offense at max efficiency, and this seems to kind of play out of his hands in regards to the personnel he has elsewhere and the scheme that he's most successful running, Mike. So it's an interesting call where he might be going with in a silo, the best choice as a quarterback, but not necessarily the best fit for what they've done best in the past.
Well, Mark, I would actually disagree with you on that point. That offense is predicated upon more than anything else. It's predicated upon sound decision-making. I think Shaun White is underappreciated athletically, and I also think he's overappreciated passing. If you look at the passing stats for Auburn last year, Jeremy Johnson had a higher completion percentage and had a better touchdown-to-interception ratio and had a better quarterback rating. Jeremy Johnson had 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Shaun White, you mentioned it, had 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, had a less than 60% completion rate. So I understand why Shaun White looked like he was running that offense better. It's because he made better decisions. That offense is a timing-based offense, and it's an offense predicated upon making good decisions quickly. And I think that's the true strength of Shaun White. I think Gus Malzahn's being very conservative as he goes into a season where he knows he needs to get back to 8 wins or else. So I think he went with Shaun White simply because of Shaun White's ability to make decisions, to make sound decisions in a quick manner, which is really the foundation of that offense. I don't know that he trusts either Jeremy Johnson or John Franklin III to make decisions. He trusts their ability to make plays, just not their ability to make decisions.
Based on what I saw last year out of Shaun White against the better teams on the schedule, his completion percentage and stats had more to do with the offensive line and more to do with the wide receiver core. Ricardo Lewis was their best wide receiver last year. I don't think anyone would have named out of this four-person panel Ricardo Lewis in the top 15 or 20 wide receivers in the SEC, and he was their best. They only bring back about 10 to 15% of the production that they had at wide receiver last year. So they recruited extremely well at wide receiver in 2016. I don't know if those guys are going to be ready to bail out Sean White against Clemson in week 1. Your thoughts, Chad, about the Sean White announcement?
Yeah, Mark. I mean, for me, here's the thing. We had just heard previously, that week, earlier in the week, that this was a three-way battle. It was a tight battle. We think we're going to let them keep going a little bit further because as of last weekend with some of the press conference with Malzahn, that was the big stickler. Was okay. Well, you've got less than 2 weeks before the opener with Clemson to prepare, and we're talking about a Clemson team that last year had only 3 starters returning on defense and went to the championship game. And so to me, when I heard the announcement, it made sense because of the fact that it's not so much Jeremy Johnson, even though Jeremy Johnson, I think, had more hype than any quarterback coming into a season a year ago than any I've seen in the last 5 years probably, and fizzled out the quickest. But JF3, if you've seen Last Chance U, which I'm going to bring it up, yes, everybody's talked about it. It's hashtagged and all that jazz. But, at the end of the day, his attitude and things of that nature, I think, may have played into it a little bit. But that being said, everything I was hearing and talking to guys who were covering the beat, he just did not look good as far as his mechanics were concerned in practice. His throws didn't look good. They weren't on par, not very accurate. Which I really wasn't surprised because what you could see out of him, and granted, Last Chance U was very edited for the most part, but what you could see out of him, he was a very run-first type of quarterback. He would take off and run, and that's where he gets a lot of the comparisons to Marshall was the fact that he would do so. But I think when you talked about arm strength, you guys hit on it. Sean White was the better choice in that area. And I feel like Sean is going to be the guy that's going to be able to come in, and he can run. And you made a point there, Mike, about his athleticism. And he isn't if you go back and look at some of his film, he can get away when he needs to. You look at the overtime game with Arkansas last year, he was able to do that. So I look at it now, and you're going up against a Clemson team that's got some seasoned defense. Would you really want to throw a guy in there that's not very experienced with your system and put him out there versus a team like that? Like if you put JF3, who, by the way, looks like he needs to eat a couple cheeseburgers because he's on the thin side, and then you stick him out there against a Clemson defense who probably has NFL caliber defenders all across its starting 11, I just think that that's really kind of a bad situation to put a guy in, who likes to run first. I just think that honestly, I think Clemson would probably fold him up like a lawn chair at times. So I think this is the smarter decision. If you want to have an offense that's going to execute, we already have questions about the running back position, about who's going to step up for Auburn. And so I think there's been some questions, too, about their offensive line coming into this fall. I think you need the most amount of experience you can in the position that's going to lead you on the offense, and that's Sean White. And I think it's actually, at the end of the day, I have to agree with Mike, I think it's actually probably the better, more solid decision.
Oh, I think it's the best decision, and I want to set the record straight that I didn't say Sean White was not athletic. I'll put him in the range of Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly's not an athlete. If you're comparing him to the guy walking down the street, yes, he's a first-rate athlete, but we're comparing guys to Deshaun Watson and the like.
He's no Cam Newton.
Kind of dynamic kind of player with the ball in his hands. Yeah, he can move, he can get around, he can keep the defense honest, but we're talking about Nick Marshall running this offense a few years ago who athletically trumps Sean White with the ball in his hands, working the line of scrimmage and then trying to find a seam and break it downfield.